Opium War.
Part 1.
During the 18th century, China was thriving due to its manufacturing of goods and exportation of silk, tea, and rhubarb to European colonies. But not for long, because they were heading towards European intervention.
Despite their future of collapse, they were still very involved with world trade, mainly in the importation of silver from the Spanish Empire. The European trade with China was mainly based off the use of silver because they had nothing else the Chinese wanted at the time. In return, the Chinese exported large amounts of tea and silk. Their trading continued through the 18th century.
However, China's social system suffered due to such high exports of tea and silk, which shifted their agricultural practices from food items to money-making crops. This severely harmed their food supply, causing a dangerous increase in food price and availability.
After the war, Europeans were in a massive debt and needed a way to increase revenue. Silver was not enough. Luckily, the Europeans, especially the British, found something they could produce that the Chinese would buy. Opium.
By the 1300s, British free trade policy unleashed a flood of opium into China, which threatened China's balance of trade. It also created a lot of drug addicts.
As a result of the massive exports of new opium, which was even more potent than before, in 1839, the Chinese commissioner Lin Zhu drafted a response to what they saw as these unfair trade practices, with a letter that contained a threat to cut off trade in rhubarb, silk, and tea, all valuable products, which foreigners could not live without.
Turns out the British never received this letter, but even if they had, they probably wouldn't have done anything because selling drugs is super lucrative. So the Chinese started confiscating loads of British opium and dumping it into the sea.
The British responded to this by demanding compensation and access to Chinese territory where they could carry out their trade. The Chinese argued that this was unfair to their people and economy and didn't comply, so the British sent a large naval expedition to end the current restrictions with force.
Chinese General Ya Ying made a counterattack in 1842, which was unsuccessful and eventually led to the Chinese signing the Treaty of Nanjing, which stated that Britain got Hong Kong and 5 other trading ports, as well as the equivalent of $2 billion in cash.
In exchange for all of this, China essentially got nothing, except the access of learning Christianity by European representatives. Chinese felt that this and further treaties with Europeans seriously eroded China's independence by the end of the century.
However, the British did not feel the same. These new ports allowed trade to flourish, but eventually did not help against the budget deficit because they continued to import large amounts of tea from China, which then counteracted all the money they just got.